So we're on Ayin Aleph 71. So we said that a shlomim cannot be made a chagiga. If, for example, you're not yotze mishum simcha, if you shech the shlomim on the 14th, we say you're not yotze mishum simcha, and you're not yotze mishum chagiga. Simcha, you're not yotze because you didn't shecht it bizman yontiv. You shechted it erev yontiv. Mishum chagiga, havi davar shebechoiva. Chagiga is a choy. V'chol davar shebechoiva ain't a bal, not chulin. This animal had already been designated as a shlomim. It's not chulin. So you can't take a prior hegdish animal and make it a korban chova. Leva Messiah. Let us say that the following beraisa supports what we just learned, that a shlomim cannot be made a chagiga. The pasuk says, "Vayisa ach sameach." The ach is a miut, and in this case, it's a riboy. L'rabois leile yontov va'achron l'simcha. That the night of Shmini Atzeres, there's also a din simcha. Ato omer leile yontov va'achron oinu ela leile yontov v'rishon. Who says that you should include the last night, the night of Simcha, of Shmini Atzeres, in the dim of Simcha? Maybe you should include the first night of Yontif to din Simcha. Talmud Lomer ach chilek. The ach separates and says only the last night, not the first night. She says kol achin v'rakin is a miut. The Havamina of the L'Rabois Leili Yom Tov Achron, because you can't shech the korban at night, but maybe you could shech the shlomim on Erev Yom Tov for your simcha of the first night of Yom Tov. So the Gemara says no. The tiny timer. Mara Isa L'Rabois Leili Yom Tov Achron Ulahotzi Leili Yom Tov Rishon. Where did you see in logic to include the last night of Simchas Torah, of Shmini Atzeres, and reject the first night? Marbani Leli Yom Tov Achron Sheish Simcha Lefana. Yeah, because there was Simcha on the 7th day of Sukkot. All the days and all the nights. So therefore, the night of Shmini Atzeres just follows that. But the first night of Yontif, the day before, is a Yom Chol. So there's no Simcha. Mostly for Rav Yosef. So Rav Yosef will ask a kasha. Chagigas Arbosar, right? This Korban Chagiga that's called Chagigas Yudalit, that is made alongside the Korban Pesach. So you have meat to eat the Seder night. Yotze bo mishum simcha, ve'ein yotze bo mishum chagiga. So this is a clear stira to what we said before. Fine, it's not going to be yotze mishum chagiga because you didn't shecht it on Yontiv, but meat it provides. So therefore, you're going to have simcha the first night of Yontiv, and therefore it's a kasha. On the brisa we said about achilek, it seems like the first night of Yontif you can have simcha as well. Now, Amai, why should it work here? You needed to shecht during the time of simcha, which is the night of the 15th, not erev Yontif. But you can't do zvicha the night. You do it in the day, so you're lacking that. How can you say that you're yoytze mishum simcha as well, right? V'leka. Aravidi baravin. You know what? She'ike v'shachta. You delayed, and you waited until nightfall to shecht it. Rav Hashi. Achanami mistavra. And I'll show you that makes sense. Ilote mahachi hamas nisaman ktanila. Who has to be this baraisa? The author has to be Ben Tema. And Ben Tema hapasle beibelina. The problem is, according to Ben Tema, you compare the Chagigas Yudala to the Korban Pesach. The Korban Pesach is going to already be possible by the morning. But a normal Chagiga is eaten for the day and the night, the next day. So Shema Mina, that it's correct that it cannot be that it works for Simcha as well. Masif Rava, a halal Simcha Shmona, that on Sukkot you have Hallel and you have the din of Simcha for 8 days. Yamrin bin Zvicha b'shas Simcha, but if in order to fulfill Simcha, the shechting has to be b'shas Simcha, hazinin sagin delo mishkachas ol shiva. You're going to have Yom Tovim, where there's only going to be 7 days, not Shmoina. Kagon shechal Yom Tov Rishon yes b'Shabbos, and the Korban Chagiga is not doicha Shabbos. So how you don't fulfill Shmona? Even on Shabbos, on the first day of Yontiv, one of the musafim is a goat that is offered for the Yontiv, and the chatas is eaten by the Kohanim. So there is a chila. So that's what it means that there's simcha even on the 8th day. So Amar Rav Shtei Tshuvas B'Davar. I could ask you 2 problems with that. Chada, the Seir Hagalim Chai Necholin, Sliya Necholin. Now, if the first day of Yontif falls on Shabbos, fine, you're allowed to shecht a korban musaf because it's a korban that belongs to that day. The problem is you can't roast it. You have to eat it raw. The simcha b'chai leka. That which we say in simcha b'basar v'yayin, that's basar that's been cooked. There is no simcha in eating raw meat. V'od kohanim oichlin v'Yisrael b'meshmechim, and a korban chatas can only be eaten by a kohanim, not Yisraelim. How are the Yisraelim going to have simcha? So, el amrav papa mesamcha b'ksus nekiv yan yoshin. It's not the only way to have simcha by eating meat. The Yisraelim would wear a new suit, and they would drink aged wine. It also gives simcha. Kiyasa Ravin, Amrab Elazar. Shlomim sheshachta me'erev yontif. They hold that if you shecht a korban shlomim, it means it's not a regular korban chagiga. It's a regular, when you agree to donate a korban shlomim to the Beis HaMikdash, if you shechted it erev yontif, you're going to eat that night of that meat. Yotze behem mishum simcha. You're yotze mishum simcha. But then yotze behem mishum chagiga. Mishum chagiga, you're not, because of you didn't shecht it on yontif, and you can't bring a korban chagiga from Koch. You got to bring it from Chulin, right? They hold differently than the previous Tanoim. Yotze mishum simcha lo ba'idin zvicha b'shas simcha. You don't need to shecht it on Yontif itself in order to have simcha. Even if you shechted it on the 14th day in the morning or the 14th day in the afternoon, you have meat that night, that's okay. You can have simcha. Ein basar el basar b'yayin, you fulfilled it. The shechting it on Yontif doesn't take away from that, as long as you eat it at the time of Yontif. But the lo mishum chagiga, because habidavar shebechoiva. Korban chagiga is a choiv. It's an obligation to bring a korban chagiga. You have to designate an animal that was previously chulin as a korban chagiga. This was a shlomim, so it's not you haven't fulfilled your korban chagiga. So Meisvei, again, we bring the pasuk that says, Vayisa ach sameach. You shall be mesameach ach. What's the ach? L'rabos leile yontav achron l'simcha. That there's a chiyuv of simcha even the night of Shmini Atzeres. Ato em l'rabos leile yontav achron, o eno el l'rabos leile yontav arishon. Maybe it comes to teach me that there's a din simcha the first night of Yontav. Talmud lemer ach chilek. No, there is no din simcha the first night of Yontav, only the last night, my time. Now, why is there no din simcha the first night? Lav mishum de'en lo b'mei yismach, because it doesn't have anything to be mesameach. Because shalmei simcha can only be offered on Yontav itself, and he shechted a shlavim from erev Yontav. Well, says no, that's not the reason. Kedetanya, like we learned previously, Mara Isa Rabbis Lili Yontav Achron Hotzi Leim Tav Rishon, Mar Bani Leili Yontav Achron Sheyesh Simcha Lefana. Prior to Shmini Atzeres, there were 7 days of Sukkot where there was a din of Simcha. Umotzani Leili Yontav Rishon Sheyesh Simcha Lefana. There's no Simcha erev Yontav, so therefore that's why, but not because technically you would not be Yotze Mishum Simcha on a shlom that you shechted erev Yontiv. So in fact, the Rambam paskins, shlomim sheshachtem erev Yontiv, Yotze behem mishum simcha. If you eat of the meat of that shlomim, the night of Yontiv, right? The night of Yontiv, you're makayim simcha. Einot tzarich lahoisif elishchot od shalmei simcha bizman tzchim. There's no requirement to shet the korban shlomim on Yontiv, to have it called Shalmei Simcha. So the halacha is like Ravin, not like Ula. Ula, the Gemara we learned before, said that in order to be Yotzei Simcha, you have to shechted on Yontiv. Ula says it can be shechted even erev Yontiv. Because in the Zman of the Beis HaMikdash, when it talked about Simcha, it always referred to Basar and referred to, eating meat. And the other things like wine and good clothing was not necessarily fell under the category of Simcha. But looks from the Gemara we learned that even Bisman Abayis, like we said, Mesamcho B'Ksus Nekiya V'Yayin Yoshin, that even Bisman Abayis, you could have Simcha through other means, not necessarily through meat. Back to the Gemara. Rav Kahana. Minay le'murei chagigas chamisha sar shenifselu b'li. Korban chagiga that was offered on the 15th day. And let's say you shechted it the night of Pesach. You didn't wait till the day. Or even if you shechted the Korban Chagiga on the day of the 15th. So the emurim, the fats, are possible belina after the first night. Even though you're allowed to eat the meat for 2 days, because Korban Chagiga is a Korban Shlamim, which allows you 2 days to eat the meat. So it's an interesting halacha. That means there's a time limit on the emurim, but not on the meat. Shneamar v'lo yalin chelev chagi ad boker. Don't leave over the chelev until the morning. V'samech le'reishis. And immediately it says reishis bikurei ad mascha. There's a pasuk there in Smichas. Lemeimer the high boiker rishon. To teach me that when it said boiker didn't mean this, the boiker of the second day, that maybe the chaylev could be left over until then. No, even boiker rishon is already possible lina. Neis maski for Rav Yosef. The only reason why we say there's nifsal belina by the korban chagiga of chamisha asar time of the cause of rashis. That's because the Torah took the trouble of writing that rashis be kriyat mascha. Haloi cause of rashis havamina my boiker sheni. I would have thought that just like the meat can be eaten for 2 days, the chaylev also wouldn't be nifsal belina after the first night. Because me'ika meated the basar ifsale me'urta ve'mor not safra. I mean, because there is no other example where there's a difference between the meat and the chaylev. Now the other problem would be the meat of it's shnei yomim v'layla echad. So if you shecht something on Monday, you can eat it all day Monday night, and all day Tuesday. You can't eat it Tuesday night. But if you're going to learn boiker sheni means the second night, that means the meat you have to stop eating only until the evening, and the chaylev you could put on even after you stopped eating the meat. More doesn't like the fact that we have a havamina without the word rashis, that it works for boiker sheni. What do you mean? I'll give you examples. Barei Pesach, the korban Pesach itself. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, the basar ifser lemechatzos from Munat Safra. So there's a major machlokas between Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah and the Chachamim whether you have to stop eating the korban Pesach by chatzos. So, for example, when we eat the afikoimen, which is supposed to represent the korban Pesach bismanas, that we stop eating it by chatzos. That's why everybody's, always worried. What time is it? Do we have to eat the afikoimen already? Well, that's because we're choishes to the sheet of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah that you have to stop eating the meat of the korban Pesach by chatzos. However, everyone holds that the emurim of the korban Pesach, right? You shechted the korban Pesach in the afternoon of Erev Pesach. The meat you eat at night at the Seder. You stop eating chatzos, but the emurim, the chaylev, could be burnt all night like any other korban. So we see an example where the meat has a different time limit than the chaylev. So Abai wants to say it's over there having the havamina of boiker sheni would not have been so problematic. So Amar Rava says no. Rav Yosef Achika Kashalei. Rav Yosef had a different kasha. The ikamidi, is there such a thing? The ilutana labas or laboy rashis. That means, would that Tana hold that you would know how to eat the meat even without the adjective rashis? One Tana holds you don't need the rashis. Rav Kahana lay more in boy rashis. To eat the meat, you don't need anything. But for the emurim, you needed a decizer of whether or not the meat, the chaylev, could be offered the next night or only the first night. What's this machlokes? Mai Tanya. Lo yalim min abasar. Don't leave over the meat. Asher tizbach ba'erev v'yom rishon laboker. Don't leave over the meat until the morning. Rashi says here we're talking about the chagigas abasar that was shechted in the afternoon, erev yontif, with the korban pesach. You can't say that it was shechted at night because the shechita has to be done in the daytime. Loyal, about Rabbi Yoshua Laboker. Li made al chagigas arbasa shenechelas l'shnei yom v'layla echad. So the chagiga arbasa could be eaten for 2 days, the 14th and the 15th, and the night of the 15th. O eino el yom v'layla. Maybe the korban chagiga yudalid, when it says bayom rishon laboker, hare boiker sheni amor, so it's already talking about the boiker sheni. It would have been enough to say bayom rishon. So by saying boiker means boiker sheni, even to the 16th. Oh, ain't all boiker rishon. Maybe you stop eating already once the morning of the 15th comes. All other chagigas are eaten for 2 days, except for this chagiga yudalid, which is only eaten for 1 day. So kishu oimer bo im neder onadava zevach korbano bayom akrivot zivcho yachel u'mocharas vanos amenu yoyachel. That's a regular shlomi. No, limed al chagigas arbos asar. That teaches me no, not like the havamina that we think you'd have to stop eating it in the morning. No, even the chagiga yudalid that is brought with the korban pesach can be eaten on the 14th and the 15th. Period. That's the baraisa. You had a havamina that maybe you would think no. Comes the baraisa to say no, you can eat it even until the next morning, the 16th. Omar Mar O Eno El Boker Rishon. Maybe there's a havamina that the chagiga yudal would have to be stopped by the morning of the 15th. Ha amit kishoyim bayom rishon laboker. Hare boker sheni omer. You understood from the word bayom rishon and then laboker that already means to the 16th, not to the 15th. How do you have a havamina that it stops by the 15th? So hachi kama. This I have to understand the Gemara. Oh eno ela b'shtei chagigos hakasam b'daber. The Torah is talking about 2 different korban chagigas. Achas chagigas abosar, right? That's the chagiga yudala that is shechted along with the korban pesach in order for you to have meat the night of the seder. The achas chagigas chamishasar, the regular korban chagig, which is brought on the day of the 15th. The zula boikra. Each one gets its morning. The chagiga yudalid gets its morning, and the chagiga Tezvav gets its morning. Rashi says, "Ushtei chagigos dibra kosu, chagigas arba'asar chamishasar, zula boikra v'zula boikra, v'hachi mashmakra." This is what the pasuk means, says Rashi.
Why would I think that you can
let's just finish the Rashi. Lo yalim b'psar chagigas arba'asar asher tizbach ba'erev. Don't leave over meat from the chagiga yudalid, which was offered, which was shechted erev yontiv. Ustam lina leboikra mashma. Stam pasuk understanding would be it would be already nifsal belina the next morning. Ume osasha tizbach bayom rishon, but chagiga chamisha asar, which is shechted on the first day. The hainu chagigas chamisha asar lo yolim leboker shel shisa asar. That means you shouldn't leave it over until the morning of the 16th. Go ahead.
I think Rashi answered. I was thinking, why would you even have a havamina to think that the 16th you could eat it? It's not yontif anymore. There's no simcha.
No, but Alan, a normal shlonim is eaten for 2 days.
I understand, but the chagiga,
so that's why we have a pasuk here, lo yolim. To teach me that, I understand that a regular shlonim could be eaten for 2 days, but in this case, the korban chamisha sar also you can't eat you can only eat until the morning of the 16th. That's how Rashi explains.
But since he compared the chagiga to the Pesach, which you only eat we can only eat 1 day, because right. Pesach was only 1 day. So the chagiga, if you extend it over,
so the chagiga yudalid follows the korban Pesach, which that's why it's nifsal already by the next morning.
Yeah, so you could. Was a havamina to think that it could be? It says originally what you think you could. Havamina to be that would be the 16th would be okay to eat it.
Because Alan, you remember we had a debate whether the chagiga yudalid is compared to the korban Pesach or not. So this and therefore is limited by the morning. So this price is clearly going like the Tana who holds that we compare Chagigas Yudalit to the Pesach. That's why its limit is the morning of the 15th. And the Chagiga Tezvav, its limit is the morning of the 16th. That's the Havamina. Im Kei. What did you need in the Pasuk? Im Neder Onadava B'mai. That seems superfluous. If you're talking about the Chagiga Yudal Haksiv by Yom V'Layla, already written Yom V'Layla. Chagigas Chamishas Haksiv by Yom V'Layla. So Im Neder Onadava, which adds with the pasuk was Im Neder Onadava Zevach Korbano B'Yom HaKrivot Zivcho Yachel U'Mimocharas V'Nois V'No Yachel. That gave me a reshus to eat for 2 days. So the Gemara is asking, what is this Neder Onadava coming to teach me? If it's coming to teach me on Chagigas Yudalid, I already know you have to stop the morning of the 15th. If it's coming to teach me Chagigas Chamishasar, I know you have to stop on the 16th. So what's that for? And for the Gemara, that the Ulaneder Uladava, Elahai lechagigas Chamishasar, is talking about the Chagiga Tezva that is offered on the first day of Yom Tov. The Heich Kula Kro lechagigas Arbasar. And the whole pasuk of Lo Yolim is only on the Chagigas Yudam. Li min Chagigas Yudam Arbasar Shnechelas L'Shayom V'Layla Echad. Why? Time of the Chsiv Bayom Harishon LaBoker. The My Boker Sheni. Great Gemara Hakol Hechad the Chsiv Boker Stama Boker Rishon. I forgot the law causes of ratios, even though there's no ratios there. So that's how Rav Kahana learned that the word ratios there is extra. And I already stated what the halacha is. No, we know about the emurim chagi. We don't know the halacha yet about the whether you get 2 days or not.
That was very difficult. That was very difficult.
Right. Mishnah. HaPesach sheshach. You want to see difficult? This Mishnah is going to be very difficult.
Oh.
HaPesach sheshachtu shelo lishmo. So we learned that if you shechted a Pesach shelo lishmo, it's possible. So therefore, if you shechted a Pesach shelo lishmo b'Shabbos, chayiv alav chatas. It turns out that you did a malacha that is a prohibited malacha because you did it shelo l'tzorech. You were machalo Shabbos b'shogeg. So you have to bring a korban chatas. He thought, just like it's mutter lishmo, it's mutter shelo lishmo. So he's not amazing. It was a shogeg. Now, shar kol azvachim sheshachta l'shem Pesach, all other korbanos, like a shlami, or a bechor, or a meiser, or a chat, well, not a chatas, let's say other korbanos. Kol azvachim sheshachta l'shem Pesach, im einon ru'uyin. Let's say they were not roy to be a korban Pesach. For example, they were female, or it was a cow, not a sheep. And therefore, there's no way you would have made a mistake thinking that it's a real korban Pesach. So again, you'd be chayav chatas. Now, if other korbanos, like a shlami, but it was a sheep, and it was a male, which are roy the korban Pesach. So in Ru'uyin Haim, Rabbi Yezer says, and he shechted it l'shem Pesach. It's another korban. According to Rabbi Yezer, you're mechayev chatas, even though he made a mistake b'dvar mitzvah. He thought it was a Pesach. Even so, Rabbi Yezer, you bring a chatas. But Rabbi Yeshua Poiter, Rabbi Yeshua says Rashi, Tov b'dvar mitzvah, he thought it was a korban Pesach. And it was really a shlamim. So he was Tov b'dvar mitzvah. Potter mechiyuv chatas. He ended up in Makriv Akor. When you shech the shlamim l'shem Pesach, the shlamim is a good shlamim. You were Makriv that korban. Kol azvachim shnizbechu shelo lishman ksherim. Even if you shech the l'shem Pesach, The reverse doesn't work. A korban pesach that you shechted for other purposes is always possible, but other korbanos that you shecht l'shem pesach works. It's lo alu l'baylim l'shem chayva. The baylim don't get, if they donated a shlamim, they have to bring another shlamim, but the animal is kosher to eat. So now we have this machlokas between Rabbi Yezer and Rabbi Yoshua b'to'a b'dvar mitzvah. Amalei Rabbi Yezer, ma'imar pesach shehu mutar lishmo. A korban pesach v'shechted lishmo is permitted, but kishashina et shmo chayiv. If you shechted a korban pesach having in mind it should be a shlamim, you're chayiv, because then it's clearly puzzle. Zvachin shein asurin lishmo. Now, on Shabbos, you're not allowed to shech the korban shlamim because it's a korban nedava. It's not a korban choiva. So Rabbi Yezer's time is, I mean, what was he doing? It's a korban shlamim, which if you shechted it lishma, here by the korban pesach, if you shechted shalom, if it's mutter lishma, but when you change it, it's chayiv. Regular korbanos that are also if you shechted it lishma, kishashina shma, now that you shechted it l'shem pesach, eno din shei chayiv. Amalei Rabbi Yeshua lo, because imam pesach sheshino b'dvar aser. When you change the name of a korban pesach eno chanami, you made it dvar. It's possible. Toimer b'zvachim sheshino b'dvar mutter. But if you shech the korban pesach l'shem psachim, it's a perfectly kosher korban. So that's why you're not chayiv v'chatas. On Rabbi Yezer, a murei tzibur yochichu. Let's say when you offer the korban a korban tomid, the daily korban tzibur, where the emurim are allowed to be put on the mizbeach. Shein mutar lishmon. V'ashoichet lishmon chayiv. Rashi says, "Emurei tzibur, korbanos ha'emurim b'tzibur b'Shabbos." Like the oilus hatamid, and then you have the innards that have to be offered. You could go to tmid and mosifim. Shemutar l'shoich l'shman. If I shech the korban tamid lishma on Shabbos, it's okay. However, ashoichet shar zvachin lishman b'Shabbos chayiv. But let's say I have a shlomim. I'm not allowed to shech the shlomim on Shabbos. So if I shechted it lishman, I'm chayiv. Amalei Rabbi Yeshua lo, im amet be'murei tzibur, sheyesh lehem kitzvah. There's not that many people bringing in korban. There's one korban tummy. Rashi says, "Eina roeh acherim harbe asukim b'shchitasan. Kivan shnishchat hatamid yodehu shein tzarich lishchot." You know that no more korban tamid have to be offered. So therefore, he's not making a mistake. He's a shogeg. Sheyesh lan kitzvah tamer b'pesach shein lo kitzvah. But everybody needs a korban pesach. He sees a lot of people shechting an animal, and he's tarud being the sasek b'mitzvah. Even if he shechted his pesach before, then he found another animal there, and he thought that it was also a pesach, and he shechted it on behalf of somebody that was there. So he's a toy b'dvar mitzvah. That's why he shouldn't not be chayiv a chatas. Rab Meir Oimer, Af Ashoichet L'Shem Emurei Tzibur Potter. If you shechted all other Shabbos of the year for Emurei Tzibur, you would also be Potter. Means even though it's more than the kitzvah, because one was already offered. So you were Shina B'dvar Mutter, and he's Mekav L'Shem Mitzvah, so you would not be Chayav Achatis. Okay. Shachto Shlo L'Achav Shlo L'Nuyav. If you're on Erev Pesach is Shabbos, and you shechted the korban Pesach for a combination of people who eat and people who were not subscribed, or a combination of people who were eaters and people who were not subscribed, or la'arelin v'latmein. You shechted it for people who were uncircumcised or tamei. So the Pesach is going to be pasul. So you did a malacha on Shabbos that wasn't l'tzorach mitzvah. However, la'oichlav v'shloy la'oichlav, it was a combination of eaters and non-eaters, or a combination of l'nuya v'shelo l'nuya, or lamulin v'arelin, to circumcise people and uncircumcised. L'tmeim v'lim, that means there were some roy people in the group, potter, because we learned before that korban would be okay. Now, let's say you shech the korban Pesach, shach of an imtza balmum. After the shechita, you find it's a balmum, so it's not a good korban. So again, you did a malacha, which had no purpose, so you're chayiv. Now, a balmum is something that you can see outwardly. It's missing a leg. So he's considered a shogeg. He's not an anus, because he should have checked. However, shachtov nimsa treifa baseser. Let's say the animal had a hole in the lung. There's no way knowing before you shechted the animal that it had that. They shechted it. They did an inspection. They found a hole in the lung. So retroactively, it's a treifa. That's potter. Because there was no way for him to know in advance that it would be a treifa. That's an oinus and not a shoygeg. Now, shachta v'noida shemoshcha b'aylemes yadam. You had 100 people who had subscribed to this korban pesach. He shechted it, and then after the fact, he was told that all these people had removed their hand from this pesach. They desubscribed. O shemeis, or they died. O shenitmu. Potter, again, they should shachat bereshus. He didn't know at the time of shechita that these things happened. So again, it's a case of onus.
So would it be that of the people that are still living, it would be still a good korban pesach, though, right? That last thing would still be a good korban pesach for people that they not all of them died, or not all of them had removed themselves from it. So those they can still partake in that.
We're talking about a case where they all died.
Oh, what about himself though? What about for himself though?
You have to have, it's not just enough for yourself. It's not enough to have shechting for yourself. You have to have a lemenuyav. And if there's no lemenuyav, then the korban pesach won't be good. If there's some people who did not die, so ein echanami, for those people will be okay. But if they all died, so there was no reshus for you to shech that korban pesach. So therefore, but you're not considered a shogeg because you're really an onus, because at the time that you shechted, you thought everybody was alive and everybody was tohar. You only found out afterwards. Rashi says onusu d'lo hayodeh shekeh, and there's no reason. There's no reason for him to check at the time he shechs.
Sure.
Okay, so tomorrow we said we're going to